Do you know what's harder than ranking Judas Priest's best songs? Picking their worst ones.
It's great, actually. It's the best job in the world.
So today let's do the unthinkable and select the weakest track from every single Judas Priest album. Here you go. Now, before the pitchforks come out, in case you guys don't know, I'm a huge Judas Priest fan, and I love every single one of their records, and I'm actually a friend of the band, so selecting the weakest song from every album was simply a torture for me. But the cruel rules of this game, which we play on this channel quite oftenly, clearly state that I simply have to select the weakest song from every Judas Priest album, which in no way means that it is actually a weak song. Although I do understand that no matter what I choose, you still most likely are going to hate me for it. But alright, let's do it.
Well, let's have a party.
Unlike many Judas Priest fans, I actually really like their debut album. And although I do understand the slight animosity the band had towards it, I actually believe that it was mostly due to its production and not really the songwriting on it. And that's exactly why I'm really happy that the band was finally able to give it a new life with the latest remix of their Rock'n'Rolla debut, which, in my opinion, for the record, actually turned out pretty great. And maybe because I never felt any animosity towards Rock'n'Rolla, I actually might view it slightly differently from many other Judas Priest fans. As if we simply take a look at the popularity on the songs on the streaming platforms, or how many times each track from it has been performed live by the band, we'll see that the three most popular songs from it are Run of the Mill, Never Satisfied, and its title track, which I actually completely disagree with. As at least to me, the only song which I actually kind of always felt was a little bit out of place on this album was actually Rock'n'Rolla itself. Simply because it didn't have that dark and gloomy atmosphere of the early 70s the rest of the songs on this album clearly had. And was and still is actually a little too upbeat for my personal taste, specifically when you listen to it among the other tracks on this record. So if I have to choose the weakest song from it, I would actually have to go with Rock'n'Rolla's title track. When Judas Priest finished working on their sophomore album, Rob Halford famously started talking from stage about how their fans might actually consider burning their copies of Rock'n'Rolla. That's how confident they were in Sad Wings of Destiny. And although I personally don't agree with the whole burning comment, I actually do agree that on Sad Wings of Destiny and later on Sin After Sin, Judas Priest were able to create the magic that represented everything early heavy metal stood for. And even more, in my opinion, both of them are actually best enjoyed when you listen to them in their entirety, from the very beginning until the very end. And each song, and especially when it comes to Sad Wings of Destiny, is simply integral for understanding the purpose of that album. Yet if I simply have to select one track from Sad Wings of Destiny that doesn't hit me as hard as a standalone track, I would actually have to go with Epitaph. And not really because it is a weak song, but rather because it is an epic which Judas Priest were not able to make truly epic because of their production on Sad Wings of Destiny. And that's why I actually truly hope that my answer for this question will change when Judas Priest finally release the remixed version of their second album. Hopefully next year. By the way guys, here real quick, I just want to point out that only around 30% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed to this channel, so if you're not one of those, and especially if this is not the first Defenders of the Faith series video you're watching here, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing right now. Let's continue building this amazing heavy metal community together. If Sad Wings of Destiny was a culmination of everything heavy metal stood for in its raw form, on Sin After Sin, Judas Priest were able to do exactly the same thing, but perfected it with actually good production, on which they collaborated, of course, with nobody else but the legendary Roger Glover of Deep Purple. And that's why selecting the weakest track from it might actually be even a harder of a task than from Sad Wings of Destiny. Yet, if we're being very honest, musically, not every song from it was actually as groundbreaking as, let's say, Distant Aggressor. And when choosing the weakest track from Sin After Sin, I would actually have to go with Raw Deal. Even though I actually love this track, and I actually think that it is simply hilarious that it was actually Rob Halford's first attempt at writing lyrics referencing gay culture, and that it took decades for fans to figure it out. No, seriously, come on! It's literally right there! Stained Glass was the album on which Judas Priest decided to break all of the rules of heavy metal of the 1970s and actually started playing the heavy metal we all know today, of which I spoke multiple times in many other Defenders of the Faith episodes. And while Stained Glass is simply packed with metal perfection, compared to such epics as Beyond the Realms of Death or Exciter, a track Invader might feel a little bit less thought through and therefore a bit more chaotic and repetitive. And although it is still fast, fun, and oddly catchy, out of the 9 tracks released on Stained Glass, in case you guys didn't realize, I'm only doing the tracks which actually originally made it to the album, I actually think that it might be the weakest link of all, although of course it is not a weak link whatsoever.
I came across a smoking field pulsating afterglow.
But at the same time, when it comes to the only Judas Priest album released the same year as its predecessor, I actually don't have any problems with selecting the weakest track. At all, as at least to me, it is the track on which Judas Priest actually counted quite a lot when doing a promo for Killing Machine. The track written specifically for crowd participation and clearly inspired by Queen's We Will Rock You, which although is actually a really fun song, well, compared to the other songs on this record, it simply does not stand any chance at all.
Put yourself in our hands so our voices can be heard.
But then came British Steel, a quintessential heavy metal album of the late 70s and the early 80s. The album which basically gave a commercial push for the development of the entire movement of the new wave of British heavy metal. And the task of selecting the weakest link from it becomes once again a very hard one, as it is one of those records which pretty much every Judas Priest fans holds very dearly in their heart. Yet at the same time, let's not forget that in addition to some of the greatest hits Judas Priest have ever written in their career, it also featured such masterpieces as Rapid Fire, Grinder, or The Rage. And so if I have to select the song which, in my opinion, well, holds the bar a little bit lower than the rest of the masterpieces on British Steel, I would actually have to go with United. As at least to me, it followed exactly the same formula as Take on the World, and although it did not get the commercial success of Living Up to Midnight or Metal Gods, well, clearly was written specifically for those purposes.
United, we stand.
Yet despite all that, British Steel was and still is a huge commercial success for Judas Priest. A commercial success which they did try to replicate on its follow-up Point of Entry, and which they were not really able to succeed in, if we're being very honest. And while no joking, I simply love this album, and some of the tracks on it are actually among my favorite ones Judas Priest have ever written. It also features one song which I personally believe might actually be the weakest track Judas Priest have written before 1990s. And those who do follow our Defenders of the Faith series and did watch my Point of Entry episode might know which one I'm actually talking about.
You say yes, I say no.
But if Point of Entry left some Judas Priest fans with rather mixed feelings, Metal Gods of course fully rehabilitated themselves on Screaming for Vengeance. The album which became double platinum in no time at all, and features some of the greatest songs ever written, and not only in the Judas Priest discography, but in heavy metal history overall. And therefore, yes, selecting the weakest song from a masterpiece, well, it's a nearly impossible task. And therefore, I actually decided to go with a song which was not actually written by Judas Priest. That one being Take These Chains, on which Judas Priest collaborated with the songwriter Bob Halligan Jr., who also gave us some Has Gone Roll. And which, although I think is a great song, if we're being very honest, well, you can't really compare it to Electric Eye or the title track, right? Those who are not new to our Defenders of the Faith series know that, well, this next one is going to be simply a torture for me, as Defenders of the Faith is my favorite Judas Priest album. It is an album which holds a very dear place in my heart, an album which I love in its entirety, and the only complaint I have about is that I always wanted more of it. No, seriously, just give me 5, 10, 20 more songs that continue the line of Defenders of the Faith, and I will simply love it. And even more, when I do listen to Defenders of the Faith, I always try to make time and to listen to it in its entirety. Starting with Free Will Burning and ending with Defenders of the Faith, simply screaming my lungs out together with Rob Halford. And so given the fact that I have to select the weakest song from it, I at first simply wanted to flip a coin. No, seriously! But of course I did not do that. Instead, I decided to go with either Heavy Duty or Defenders of the Faith itself. But given the fact that the latter one, of course, gave us one of the most iconic phrases for all of the Judas Priest fans, and also gave this series its title, well, I simply decided to go with Heavy Duty. Which, once again, is not a weak song whatsoever, and I can't believe that I don't get even one pass on this video, and simply have to name the weakest song from Defenders of the Faith as well. By the way, guys, it is so awesome to see so many of you representing the Metal Pilgrim community at the current Shield of Pain tour, wearing the Metal Pilgrim merch, including our new Defender of the Faith design. And just in case if you would like to order one for this summer or autumn, I'll be more than happy to send it pretty much anywhere across the world. The links to order it will be, of course, in the description to this video. When it comes to Judas Priest's most commercially oriented studio album, that one of course being Turbo, I actually had no problems with selecting the song which I liked the least from that record. Although, by the way, I actually do enjoy Turbo quite a lot. But at the same time, the only question I personally had when making this video was whether I will go with Private Property or Parental Guidance when selecting the song that I liked the least from Judas Priest's 10th studio record. But then after listening to both of them on repeat several times, I realized that although musically, well, they're pretty much on the same level for me, Private Property is simply a little less fun than the cheesy but a really catchy and a fun one, Parental Guidance. So yeah, I'll actually have to go with that one when it comes to Turbo. Ram It Down is a great album, and I'll actually fight anyone who disagrees with me on that one, because I actually believe that the songwriting on it is simply amazing, and my only problem with it is, of course, its drum section and production overall. But once again, when it comes to playing songs live, and especially with such a monster of a drummer as Scott Travis is, I would take any song from Ram It Down any day of the week and replace it with even the biggest hits Judas Priest have ever written, as I would simply love to hear as many songs from this album as possible live. And maybe that's why when it comes to the weakest song from it, I will actually have to go with one not written by Judas Priest. Picking Johnny Be Good, on which Judas Priest once again counted quite a lot when it comes to the promo of Ram It Down, as the weakest one on it overall. Which I think many of you will actually agree with me on. But then came Painkiller, the album which to this very day represents everything heavy metal stands for. The quintessential metal album which Judas Priest released right before breaking up and before the hardest decade in the existence of our favorite music genre. And at least to me, this album is simply flawless once again. And therefore, selecting the weakest song from it is a task which clearly depends on your mood today and might change tomorrow. And therefore, once again, I'll have to go with a song which is not weak at all, and quite the opposite, is actually among the favorite songs Judas Priest ever wrote in their career for many Judas Priest fans, and the one that I really hope that the band will perform at some point in the future. But once again, please do not think that I just said that Metal Meltdown is a weak song. Those who are not new to our Defenders of the Faith series know that I simply love defending Tim Ripper Owens' era of Judas Priest. And there is actually quite a lot to defend there. And overall, I actually believe that if not for Tim Ripper Owens, Judas Priest might have not even existed today, and Rob Halford would simply not have anything to come back to in the 2000s. But at the same time, when it comes to the two albums Judas Priest released together with Tim, if we're being very honest, by far not every song from it is a masterpiece. And overall, my biggest problem with both Juggulator and Demolition is that it has quite many fillers, which are absolutely unnecessary on that album. One of those, when it comes to Juggulator, being Abductors, which is the track I simply do not understand why the flip Judas Priest decided to represent Juggulator with back in 1998. And the same goes for Demolition. And yes, Cyberface is by far the weakest song on it, at least for me. Angel of Retribution, despite the whole fact that I do understand that it is not the strongest album Judas Priest have ever made in their career, is actually one of my favorite ones, because it does hold a very special place in my heart. And I vividly remember listening to Judas Rising for the very first time and simply freaking out about the whole fact that Rob Halford was back together with Metal Guts. But although many fans might actually go with an experimental Loch Ness as the weakest track from it, I would actually have to disagree. I always did like that song, although I kind of agreed that it didn't really fit on the album musically and theme-wise as well as the other songs on it. But at the same time, I simply cannot make myself to name it the weakest track from Angel of Retribution, and therefore I would have to go with another one, that one being Demonizer, which, although once again is actually a fun song, well, simply doesn't really hit me as hard as the other ones on it. And thus we come to the most experimental album Judas Priest have ever made, or at least to date. The album which so many people simply love to hate, but the one that I actually truly enjoyed when it actually came out back in 2008. But given the fact that this album has 23 songs, many of which are simply connectors in between the tracks, for the purpose of this video I'll have to go with the ones that actually were composed and can be listened to as standalone tracks, out of which I have absolutely no problems of choosing Conquest as the weakest song from Nostradamus. I don't know, it always felt rather unnecessary to me. Redeemer of Souls is one of those albums which I truly hope Judas Priest will remix after said Wings of Destiny, as I always believe that the songwriting on it is actually pretty awesome, but the production wasn't really up to par with what Judas Priest could do. And by the way, for this one, just like for Invincible Shield, I will be talking about the standard edition, not taking into account the songs that were released on the deluxe one, although if I would actually have to go with Creatures as the weakest track from this album. But when it comes to the songs that actually made it on the standard version, I would actually have to select Metallizer as the one that doesn't hit me as much as the other ones on Redeemer of Souls. Which kinda now makes me think that I simply might not like songs that have Izer in the end of their titles. But then came Firepower, and once again it was Judas Priest in their flawless form, which, although was of course a great thing for all of us Judas Priest fans, is simply a nightmare for me while making this video, as once again selecting the weakest song from it is actually a very hard task. But given the fact that I simply love some tracks from it way more than the others, I would have to go with Flamethrower, which, although is very groovy, might be somewhat of a least dynamic track for me when it comes to Firepower. Yet once again, it is not a weak song at all, and is by far better than 99% of metal released that same year.
No one will be saved. Consecrate with fire.
And thus we come to the band's latest studio output. Well, at least for now. And here's the thing, even today, a year and a half later, I actually believe that Invincible Shield is an incredible heavy metal album, and I actually think that it might be considered among Judas Priest's best ones when YouTubers will be looking back at their discography 50 years from today. And once again, selecting the weakest track from it might actually depend on your mood, and so I decided to at least try to not overthink it way too much and go with Sons of Thunder as the, well, least strong song from it, which I do understand that might be simply because I really don't have a bike and I really want one.
Take it or leave it, none but the brave.
But anyways, that's it. This is the list of the least strong songs from every single Judas Priest album. Yes, making this video was a torture for me. But what about you? What would your list look like? Please let us know in the comments, and as well as the albums with which you absolutely disagree with me on. I'm really curious to find out. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!